Coming to you from the shores of gorgeous Lake Michigan, this is home to passionate book lovers. Hosting more than 270 acclaimed authors in 14 years, including best-selling novelists Geraldine Brooks, Ann Patchett, and Mitch Albom. We are live at Lars Hockstad Auditorium in downtown Traverse City, Michigan. Welcome to the National Writers Series. Tonight, a conversation with best-selling author Shelby Van Pelt and her hit novel, Remarkably Bright Creatures, with guest host Beth Milligan, lead writer and reporter at the Traverse City Ticker. The National Writers Series couldn't do this without our amazing audience, dedicated volunteers, and talented authors.
I love NWS!
We are also raising writers with Battle of the Books and free writing classes to 3rd through 12th grade students across the region.
Thank you, NWS!
Tonight's event is presented to you by the Clark and Karen Bunting Natural Wonders Author Conversations. A special thanks to our media partners, Interlochen Public Radio and the Traverse City Record Eagle. We'd also like to thank our other sponsors, including the Green Brick Foundation, Northgard Technology, Golden Fowler Furnishings, West Shore Bank, Ward and Mary Bevins Gillette, Cordia, and the Cherry Capital Airport. And now, NWS co-founder and #1 New York Times best-selling author, Doug Stanton, will introduce tonight's event.
Good evening. Thank you, Noelle, and thank all of you for coming. You're here to, of course, see Shelby Van Pelt. I just want to welcome you. Personally, I want to first of all also thank Karen and Clark Bunting for their support of the Natural Wonders series. Clark is an important member of the National Writers Series board, in fact, its president, and we're thriving under his leadership for sure. Also want to thank Levi Britton. A round of applause for Levi. Yes. You can find Levi's work under Stolen Silver on Spotify. I just asked him before the show, so please go there and like him and download, and he'll make an extra $27. That's the way it goes with arts these days. And thank you also to Michigan writers in the back. They had a table back there. They've long supported storytelling and writing workshops in Michigan, and we're grateful for their presence too. As you know, my name is Doug Stanton, and we started this about a decade ago, and we'd like to bring authors to this stage in the City Opera House and have them tell their stories about what it feels like to be alive today in this moment, what it is to be them through the lens of their storytelling, their prose, and their artistry. And we're so glad tonight to have Shelby here with Beth Milligan. You know her byline from the Ticker, right? I always love Beth's work in the Ticker. She's a round of applause. She's the head writer, and she's an industrious reporter, and if you have a hot tip or any gossip, you can give it to her after the show. Shelby is here to talk about, as you know, Remarkably Bright Creatures. It's published in 2022 during the COVID years, and she in fact didn't do a big hardcover book tour, but since then she's been on a tear, and the book has spent an aggregate over a year on the New York Times bestseller list, and it's her debut novel. And she's going to talk about tonight how it took 6, 7, 8 years for her to write this novel at night and reach all of you. It's quite a remarkable story. I'd like to take a moment here to express our gratitude for being in this building, for being under the wise visage of Abraham Lincoln, in a building named after a Swedish immigrant, Lars Hockstad, and also on land cherished for generations by the indigenous people of this area. And we want to recognize the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians who still reside here today. Thank you. Now please join me. Please join me in welcoming two incredibly bright people, Shelby Van Pelt and Beth Milligan.
I almost slipped and fell on that rug. Yeah. I always say before events, like, I'm always worried I'm going to trip, and I almost did it today.
Yeah, in northern Michigan, I try not to wear heels that often, so
Yeah.
I had the same worries. So thank you for going first.
None of you saw it.
And do send me your hot gossip if you have any. Thanks for that, Doug. So you guys, it's so exciting to be here with Shelby tonight. As Doug was mentioning, this is your first novel.
First and only.
It has sold over 2 million copies. It's also been a Read with Jenna Today Show book club pick. It was awarded the Heartland Prize for Fiction, the first novel prize from the Writers Center. And it was just recently announced that the book is becoming a movie with Netflix. It's going to be directed by Olivia Newman, who directed Where the Crawdads Sing, and will be starring Sally Field as Tova.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Which is so exciting. So this feels like you're overachieving a little bit for your first book.
Just know that I'm never going to be able to repeat it again, so, you know.
So what has the last year or two been like for you?
I mean, it's turned up my world upside down in the best possible way. The roles in our house have become very much reversed from what they used to be. I was a stay-at-home mom for 8 years and was the primary person in charge of the kids and the house and all that stuff. And now my husband's at home doing that. He doesn't always do it the same way that I would. It's okay. In other ways, I feel like it has changed not at all. Like, I'm struck by the fact that I'm still sitting down at my desk every day struggling to write a book. Still needs to be done and folded, like, life kind of goes on. But yeah, it's been a truly wild ride.
Yeah, I mean, I want to ask you about that because we've had so many authors at the Writer Series over the years who have come here with long careers under their belts. You know, everyone from David Sedaris to Mitch Albom, Jodi Picoult, and I have no doubt that you will be back here in the future with more of your books. But it's really interesting to talk to an author who's kind of at the start of that journey, because I do have to imagine that your world has been turned upside down, probably your family's world too. And I'm really curious, I'm sure there's been some joys and surprises that have come with that, but maybe some challenges too.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the one of the biggest changes is that it changed my relationship to writing and to reading. Writing has always been like a hobby, before it was a job. Reading, I'm a longtime reader. I love reading. Now reading is kind of in the work sphere. And so I've had to kind of find new hobbies, because it's good to have something that you just do for the pure joy of it, not because you're necessarily good at it or trying to make money at it. I've recently started taking guitar lessons. I played when I was a kid, and I'm like, I'm going to play guitar really badly and have it not matter.
And what about just becoming famous, like from a personal level? How is that for you? Do you like being, I mean, you're here obviously doing great events with people, and you seem like you've been doing a lot of touring, but how has that been for you?
I mean, the events are a lot of fun. I love meeting readers. I love meeting people. I guess I'm maybe a little bit more extroverted than some other authors and writers, because I truly do enjoy it. The only place I've ever been recognized was at a bookstore, which tracks, right? And that was a pretty cool moment. But I guess authors, I don't know, at least not at my level, aren't getting to the level of fame and fortune where you can't go to the supermarket. I'm certain that no one in my supermarket knows who I am.
Yet. Okay, so Remarkably Bright Creatures. We've got a fantastic narrator in Marcellus, who I know many of you in the audience will probably have read the book, but if you haven't yet, that is a giant Pacific octopus. That is the narrator of our book, who is bored and trapped in an aquarium and befriends an older cleaning woman there. You've spoken about how Marcellus came to you, which was, you said you had watched a video of an octopus online, and then you were taking a continuing education class or a local university where you were assigned to write from an unexpected point of view. First, I'm in the advisory board for NMC's continuing education program, and I want to give a shout out to that. For you guys, keep taking those classes in life, because you never know what could happen.
I'm such a fan of those classes. Yeah. They're accessible, they're usually relatively affordable, low commitment. You're not signing up for a 2-year program. A lot of times it's 6 weeks or something. I just think they're so fantastic. I still am involved in one of them that's near me, down in the Chicago suburbs. And they're just great for people, no matter what stage of the journey that you're on. It's a welcoming space.
And so I want to ask you, as you started to develop this, in response to this writing prop of coming up with an unexpected point of view, which is how you came up with Marcellus, how did you start to develop his specific voice and personality? Because it's so great in the book.
I really think I was probably a cranky old man in a previous life. This came so naturally to me. It's a little bit scary. No, I think the voice kind of was there from the beginning. And, it's a little bit like Stewie Griffin, but not quite as mean. That is just something that I heard in my head. The language was a little bit more challenging. That is where I feel like when I was writing and then later editing, I really had to get almost down to every single word. Would Marcellus know this word? What would the context be for him knowing what a sandwich is, or whatever it is? So that part was challenging. But the voice was so much fun. I just love how sarcastic he is. I feel like I'm a little bit of a sarcastic person, but I don't get to always let it out. And it was just like kind of letting out that side of me. It was a lot of fun.
Nice. Well, you can let it out here tonight if you want to. Has anyone in the audience listened to the audiobook? Yes, look at all the hands. Okay, that's great. I read the book and also listened to the audiobook. I love the audiobook. The actor who plays Marcellus is fantastic. And I wondered if you mentioned Stewie, so did he sound like that in your head?
A little bit, yeah. So the actor is Michael Urie. Has anyone seen the TV show Shrinking? I think they just came up with it. See, he's in Shrinking. He's the snarky lawyer friend. So you will not be able to unsee it now, or unhear it. Yeah. And he's been on Broadway a bunch. He was in Ugly Betty, but so he's had a long career as an actor. I was shocked that he agreed to narrate a weird debut novel from an unknown author. But he did a fantastic job. Maren Ireland does the rest of the narration. She also did a fantastic job. But yeah, I've been so lucky at so many points on this journey, and I feel like that's just another one where you get two major forces in the audiobook world to come do a debut novel. I'm so grateful for them.
Yeah, and I imagine, especially because this is your first book, you have spent so much time with these characters in your head and heard them in your own way. It must be really interesting to hear like a different cast bring this whole story to life in a different way.
Yeah, and as a reader, sometimes with audiobooks, that can be hard, right? If it doesn't match what you think it would sound like. But I think they did a pretty good match for how I would have envisioned it in my own head when I was writing. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the movie in the Marcellus voice.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. I mean, they could get the same actor, potentially.
They should.
Well, you should have some say in that, I think.
If they're listening, no, they don't have to listen to anything I say, but they've been pretty good about taking my input so far.
Yeah, so let's talk about the movie. I mean, Sally Fields as Tova, when I heard that casting, that seemed incredibly wonderful, like a wonderful fit. And so what do you think about the book becoming a movie, and how much say will you have in it? Because different authors have different levels of engagement with their films when they're adapted.
I mean, I feel like contractually I have zero say. I mean, really no control over anything. And that's a little bit scary, like that, particularly when you put parts of yourself into a book. I put parts of myself into my characters. I put parts of my family into my characters. And then, as scary as it is to publish a book about it and, have this whole team of people kind of involved, the movie is like that on steroids. Now it's in the hands of someone else, and you really have to trust that they're going to do it in a way that is good. And I do trust my team. I think they're fantastic. They have been very collaborative with me. We've had some Zoom calls going through various plot things. I've read a couple drafts of the script. It's not exactly the same as the book, but it's very close, at least in spirit.
And Sally Fields, how do you feel about that?
And yeah, Sally's been kind of involved since the beginning. I think her son gave her the book. At least that was the story I heard. Right when it came out, so a couple years ago. And she's been kind of very interested in the role from the get-go. So I'm really excited to see what she does with it.
It'll be great because I think Tova, obviously along with Marcellus, is just such a wonderful character in the book. And you've talked about how she was inspired by your own grandmother. One of the things I loved about this book is that it does center some older characters and talks about some of the issues facing the elderly. So you have, how we treat older people in general, how they worry about aging alone, wanting to still work and have value, that kind of point in your life where you're like, I'm going to end up in a home, or what's going to happen with the rest of my life. And I think we don't talk about those issues enough, especially in our culture, which seems so youth-oriented. And so I was curious if there were experiences with your own grandmother that made you think about that or want to address that.
I mean, I think, so my grandmother was very similar to Tova in many ways. Like, the circumstances of Tova's life are all fiction. But Tova's mannerisms are my grandmother's mannerisms. Her outlook on the world was very much my grandmother's outlook on the world. My grandmother loved cleaning, which is not something I inherited. But truly, truly loved cleaning. And she did. She worked as a cleaning lady in her, I think, must have been in her 80s at that point, 70s and 80s. I would go with her sometimes. She would clean church basements. They didn't really need the money, but it was just for something to do, which obviously is pretty much the same circumstances that Tova has in the book. But yeah, it's I think a lot of me writing this character of Tova was me sort of grappling with some regret over not really spending as much time with my grandmother, especially in her older years, as I could have. Like Tova, she was a very, very sweet but very stoic. Everything was always just fine. We don't talk about our feelings, all that good, nice Scandinavian kind of grit. And I wish I had cracked that shell open a little bit more. And so I think, and I've only realized this after writing the book. I didn't realize any of this when I was writing it. But on reflection, I'm like, oh, I think I was just kind of, exploring that relationship a little bit, and maybe what it could have been if I had been around, when living in different cities. Because you can't ever go back, right? It's...
Call your grandparents, you guys.
Yeah.
There's also, you deal with themes of grief, with being stuck. Marcellus, obviously, in an aquarium, but you have other characters who's next. If I think about the timing, right, finishing this up as the pandemic was hitting, and of course it was released in 2022, so I think the themes of being stuck and lost probably resonated with folks with that timing, and I was curious if that was weighing on you too while you were finishing it.
Yeah, I remember having a moment when I was deep in drafting, trying to get it done. I spent probably 6 years writing the first 3 chapters, and then about 6 months writing the rest of it. And those 6 months were largely during those first few living room window. Kind of just this the themes, the sort of stuckness had been there literally from the very beginning, but I think being stuck while writing it definitely probably made me lean into those a little bit. I also think it made the book, oddly enough, maybe more joyful. Not that it wouldn't have been joyful otherwise, but I feel like at that point, I just needed a happy story. And so there was no way in the world I was going to write anything but a warm hug of a book, because that's what I needed.
I mean, it's interesting because some authors went the other way and went bleak, and but that's nice to have some joy in the world.
That's why it's fiction. We can do whatever we want.
Well, one of the things I loved about it is it seems to suggest that one of the ways to get unstuck, one of the key ways to get unstuck, is through community and having community around you. I know you've talked about moving around a lot in your life, but I'm curious kind of for you where you're at now with that. Have you been able to find that for yourself, especially going through this journey the last couple of years? You have that community that kind of helps you stay grounded and unstuck.
Yeah, so I think one of the big ways that I see myself reflected in my characters, and in Tova in particular, so Tova, she's very lonely. She lives in a small town. I love writing small towns, and has all these friends around her. She's sort of surrounded by people who care for her and who would love to do more to care for her as her needs change and increase, but she won't let them. She will not let them in. She kind of keeps everyone at arm's length. Everything is always just fine. I had a realization that I was a little bit like that too when my kids were little. And the analog is sort of, you're going through this difficult time. I definitely had postpartum depression with both of my kids. And my husband was traveling for work all the time. We were living in Atlanta. We didn't have any family there, didn't have much of a community. And, you go to these like play groups and, you watch your kids run around and you try to make mom friends. And I remember always being I've realized that that's something that I struggle with. That's if I was a character, that would be my flaw too. And I've worked really hard to try to overcome that and, allow myself to be more vulnerable and open up and not just kind of keep people at a distance. And, to, I guess, bring it full circle, it's been really interesting doing that in the context of, like, book events and going to book clubs and just seeing kind of the magic that can happen over a discussion of a book when you let those guards down.
Yeah, I mean, even just being able to, address postpartum or issues like that, I think that goes so far in helping other people be able to talk and connect and share those things. And I have to imagine with how much this book has resonated with people that you've had complete strangers come up to you and tell you personal things about their lives that have connected with the book.
Yeah, it's really magical. It is. I've had conversations with people that are, just deep, vulnerable, meaningful, hard, beautiful conversations with someone whose name I don't even know. It's incredible.
So I would venture a guess that this book has probably changed the way you think about animals. First, I'm curious, and Ann Stanton was curious if you've stopped eating octopus.
So I never ate a lot of octopus to begin with. I don't actually think I like it much. I don't know. But no, I don't. I don't eat it. I have eaten calamari as squid, so it's a little different. It's okay. You can eat calamari. But no, it has definitely changed just the way that I see, I guess, the role of books and stories in like connecting people to the natural world and to animals. It can be very, very powerful. It's incredible.
Well, has it changed the way that you think about animals generally? And I wonder more specifically, just in terms of like their interior lives or what's going on with them, but also animals in captivity.
Yeah, so I didn't want this to be a book that tells you what to think one way or another about anything or preaches at you about animals in captivity, but I did very much want to bring that tension in because, I don't know whether it's right or wrong to do, certain things to animals in certain circumstances. I don't have those answers, but I feel that tension, and I wanted readers to feel that with me. I think you could ask, okay, are aquariums bad? I think there are people out there who think they are wholesale and should, not exist. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got the other end of that. If any aquarium is good or bad, I don't know. You kind of know it when you see it, I guess. And all of the aquariums that I've visited, for the most part, have been staffed by incredibly caring people who, are putting the needs of these creatures very, very high, and are doing great work with conservation and research. And so, it's not anti-aquarium, but it's not pro-aquarium either, I guess.
Yeah, I'm a huge marine biology nerd. I love the ocean. I saw Free Willy when I was 10, and I was like, that's going to be my life. And then I found out about math, and I was like, no, it's not.
Oh, gosh.
But I do love aquariums, and I share that tension of, highly sentient animals, but also the education, the conservation that goes along with it. Monterey Bay is obviously a beautiful aquarium set in sort of the same area as the novel, and I wondered if there were any specific aquariums that you had based yours on.
Yeah, so I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, and we have the Point Defiance Aquarium and Zoo in Tacoma. It's kind of like the gem of Tacoma. And I spent a lot of time there as a kid. I went to day camp there in the summer because my parents both worked. And and they had this aquarium that is very much like the aquarium in the book. It's not in service anymore. They have now built a big, new, beautiful one. But the old one was this kind of squat, round building. It was all concrete inside. It was dark. It smelled like feet. It was always wet. It's like, why is the floor wet? I don't know. Let's not ask. Let's keep moving on. But I loved it. It was my favorite place in the whole zoo. It felt like being kind of let in on a secret to be in there and be face to face with these incredible animals. So yeah, I have a lot of warm memories of that place as a kid that I brought into this book.
Yeah, and I think if you grew up in Traverse City and went to the Traverse City Clinch Park Zoo, as I did with the one sad bear, and I was dealing with Grandview Parkway traffic, and there was also a little aquarium like that I remember, just some Great Lakes fish in it. And I think it does speak to the fact that it can inspire kids even, with some of the challenges it has.
Yeah.
So I love the title of your book, and one of the things I really loved about it when I read the book was that the title doesn't refer to what you think it does when you pick it up, or at least for me, what it does, you think it's referring to maybe some of the animals or the octopus in the book, and it's about humans. It's really what Marcellus thinks about humans, and I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah, it's really fun how that worked out.
just magically kind of happened.
I wish I could say I had planned it that way from the beginning, but it was one of those really fun, happy things that just clicked into place like a little jigsaw puzzle piece at the end. That was a great moment.
I loved that, and I wondered, when you're interacting with the world and interacting with animals, whether it's a pet or just being out in nature or hiking or whatever, do you sometimes think differently about how animals might be perceiving us?
Well, I live with two very judgmental cats. So I'm pretty used to being perceived in a certain way by animals, at least in my mind. And I'm pretty sure I'm right about what they're thinking at any given time. I've got them down at this point. But yeah, it is. It's very fun when animals are curious about us. In the same way that we're curious about them. And that curiosity was definitely one of the themes that I, really wanted to explore in the book. For as cranky and curmudgeonly and grumpy as Marcellus is, he's also very curious. He almost kind of can't help himself, but be curious about these weird, biped creatures that make up his environment. And I think my younger child was 3 when I was doing a lot of this drafting, and I think I brought a lot of his toddler curiosity into Marcellus, which again, I don't think I would have recognized that at the time, but in hindsight, I'm like, oh yeah, I did. I was really inspired by this somewhat persistent, occasionally annoying toddler who was constantly trying to climb up the side of my chair while I was trying to work during COVID. But yeah, there is definitely something kind of curious and childlike about Marcellus, and I think we do see that in a lot of animals.
So how did you decide? You were referring earlier to whether Marcellus would know certain words or not. How did you, and I think you've talked, I know you have some friends in the marine biology world. You obviously spend a lot of time watching, seeing what octopus are doing. And
they don't do much a lot of the time in captivity.
But how did you decide how much Marcellus could know? And obviously he's key to unraveling some of the mysteries in the book, and so you can give him a lot of power as the author, as a narrator, but you probably want it to be believable and credible too. So how did you decide what he might realistically know or be able to do?
So that was a tricky line to figure out exactly where that line was, because you take even a little bit of a step over it and it becomes so cheesy. Or just, completely not believable. So one area that we drew a pretty hard line was around Marcellus's physical actions. Everything that he is doing physically is possible. If you were to just watch disregarding the narration for a moment, the way that he is moving around his world and manipulating it are all things that an octopus could do. And I did have to do some editing after running it by some of these marine biology octopus experts. I was like, okay, yeah, an octopus can't carry a piece of paper. An octopus cannot operate a photocopier. No.
It's worth a shot.
So I definitely did some editing around that, really tried to make his physical movements all be as close to true life as possible. Everything that's happening in his head is all fantasy. As far as we know, octopuses can't read. But that's the fun of it. We don't know. We really don't. And I feel like one of the great joys of being the author of this book is that people send me articles and things about octopuses. I don't even have to go look for it anymore. It just shows up in my DMs. It's great. But I feel like we're learning so much more about them. Even now coming out that, that they have dreams, that the way that they can have memories. From very, very long ago, and that's something that happens in the book as well. I just think it would be hard to get away with having an animal narrator do some of the things that Marcellus does if it were a dog or cat, because we kind of understand them. They're mammals like us. We're laid out in kind of the same way. We have a pretty good grasp of what they are thinking, as much as they could be. But octopuses, we don't know. They're like aliens. Their brains are not the same as ours. They came up on a completely different branch of the evolutionary tree. There's so much that we don't know, and with that, when you're an author, that's the possibility. Because we don't know, I can get away with a little bit more.
And I know you've talked about this before, but the timing was good because of My Octopus Teacher, which is a documentary. If anyone's, I'm sure some people have seen that in the audience. Great film. So it seemed like there was some synergy happening in the culture around this interest in this animal.
Yeah, it's in the zeitgeist, as they say. My Octopus Teacher came out in that summer of 2020. I don't know if it was August or September, but I remember having a moment. I had finished my manuscript, all these years and months of hard work of getting it done. I had written my query letter, which is a whole other challenging process in itself. And I was getting ready to cold query agents. I was going to send this thing out in the world. And I was feeling pretty anxious about that, I think. My kids were watching Netflix in the other room because they watched all day during COVID. The American Academy of Pediatrics is going to show up at my house and be like, "You ruined them." I don't know. What else were we supposed to do? I don't know. But the trailer for My Octopus Teacher came on. I didn't know that's what it was. I just heard this sound wafting in. It was like, an incredible friendship between a human and an octopus, and a remarkable journey of animal-human connection. And I kind of cried. I sat down on the floor and was like, oh no. Because I thought that someone else had taken my story and made a movie out of it. But obviously it ended up being a very, very, very lucky thing to have it in the world.
I don't think that this audience probably needs to be convinced of the importance of libraries and bookstores, but your book has certainly brought attention to that. First, so many bookstores helped hand sell this novel to customers. I know there's been some talk about how people would come in and be like, "Do you have that octopus book?" They couldn't remember the title, but the bookseller would know, as they often do, and would help them find the title. You did an event recently with Jodi Picoult, who was also just here recently for the Writers Series, which was a fantastic event. And you both posted about the importance of supporting libraries, especially in a time right now where we're dealing with a lot of censorship and book banning issues again. So how has your relationship with bookstores and libraries evolved since your book came out?
I mean, I've always had so much appreciation for those folks, but I think now it's just even more. I did a lot of drafting at my local library before COVID hit. That was kind of my spot where I'd camp out. So I've always been a big user of my library and supporter of them. But yeah, they go through so much. They probably don't get paid well enough to deal with some of the stuff that they have to deal with. But they're just great people. I mean, I don't think anyone goes and opens a bookstore because they want to get rich. They do it because they love books and they want to be in that world. It truly is like a passion job, and I think that comes through. Every time I've interacted with the people that were in those stores and work at those stores, they're there because they love books. It's not just a job. It's like a passion, and they do so much for authors in hand selling the books and making little shelf talkers, which are so cute. Hosting events, they're just fantastic.
And I see this sometimes in bookstores and libraries where, because the staff are so engaged and excited about books, like you mentioned, they'll make their own art or they'll make staff recommendations and stuff. And I know book clubs have done the same. Certainly fans have. I'm curious, what have you gotten people getting Marcellus tattoos, because I'm gonna get
Yeah.
one because I love Marcellus. But like tattoos, art, things like that have kind of been fun to see.
Yeah, there have been some tattoos. That's really fun. And I think octopuses are a popular tattoo anyway. So, Marcellus is just maybe giving someone an extra nudge that they didn't know they needed. But yeah, I have a whole wall of art in my office at home that is mostly things that people have made, and I've kind of made a little collage out of it. My publicist at Echo actually dabbles in doing watercolors, and she shared with me something that she had painted, an octopus, and it was before the book came out. This was when she had read it when it was on submission. And I was like, oh, is it okay if I print a copy of that? I want to put it on my wall. And she sent me the original framed. So that's really special. That was the first fan art before the book was even out.
Yeah, and in addition to being a popular book club pick, the book has been assigned reading at many high schools. And I'm curious what it's been like for you. You obviously have many adult reader fans, but what's it been like for you hearing from younger readers of the book?
Yeah, I think it's great that they're reading it. There aren't really teenagers in this book, and so I think it's incredible that kids would read a book that is very much not about them. But some of the themes, the loneliness, the struggle to change and adapt, those are universal themes. So hopefully it appeals to people no matter where they are in life. But one of my favorite things is hearing, and I get this at book clubs a lot, that a mom and a daughter read it together, or even sometimes a grandparent, parent, and child have all read it and discussed it. And there's not that many books that you can do that with, I don't think. So that's very special.
You can all read it and then all go get your Marcellus tattoos together, which is a great family outing. Were there books that had a big influence on you? Like you were assigned in high school, college that you remember that kind of stood out? Because sometimes it can kind of push you like, oh, I got assigned reading, I don't like it. But others I remember when I was young that kind of stood out for me. I'm curious if you remember any of those kind of books for yourself.
Oh gosh, here's when I'm going to admit something a little embarrassing. I was more of a lazy student than, I knew exactly what I had to do to get an A, and I did that and not a lick more. I remember not finishing The Scarlet Letter. I don't think I still have ever finished it.
It's not very pro-women,
no,
so...
it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember we, in my high school English class, we read Lord of the Flies. We took an entire semester to read Lord of the Flies. That's not a semester's worth of book. I don't know what we were doing. I guess what I'm saying is I was always a little bit frustrated. I preferred my own reading. And to do it on my own time, wasn't super big into doing it for classwork. But I read a lot. I read a lot of Sweet Valley High, and the Babysitters Club, and all sorts of quality literature.
I was the same way. I would skip class, but I wouldn't go smoke or do cool kid things. I would go read in the library like a nerd. Shout out to Miss Vanderzee.
I spent a lot of time sitting on the floor of my library reading every single Babysitter's Club that they had.
Well, I want to ask you about your writing process because I love that when I've heard you talk about it, it's different than when I've heard from a lot of authors. So we've had a lot of authors on the Writer Series stage who have, very set routines, very sort of ritualized approaches to writing, and that obviously works for them. But some of the interviews I've heard you talk about, you have kids, you have a busy life, and that wouldn't work for you. So what did you find did work for you?
Writing at night after my kids were in bed. Far and away the most productive time. And it still is my most productive time. There's just something about a truly quiet house, a dark house, a stretch of time that doesn't really have an endpoint to it. I mean, there's the sunrise, and I have done that a couple times. But yeah, I've tried to become a morning writer and a morning person. And I find, I get up at 6 and, okay, I'm going to write from 6 to 7:30. And, 7 o'clock, I start, people start coming down the stairs. And all of a sudden, they're in my space. And I get kind of annoyed by it. And I don't like that. I don't want to feel like my family is interrupting me. And I don't know that they can really avoid interrupting me. So I do a lot of writing at night. I'm a little bit more of a I'll like go on a tear for a day and write 5,000 words and then like not touch it for 3 days, versus sitting down and doing the 1,000 words every day. But those are all ways to get there. I just find when I can get myself into that zone, where it's coming and it's flowing, I don't want anything to interrupt it. But I'm also probably going to be really exhausted the next day.
Sure. I mean, I think that's good to talk about because, writers are often asked, obviously, to give advice about writing for people who might want to do something like that. And the answers can sometimes be like, well, you need to do the same thing, or you think that you have to adapt the same routine and the same approach. And it's highly individualistic, I think, is what you're saying to each person.
Yeah, I think you have to do what works for you. And so I tried the thing that works for a lot of people. It didn't work for me. I also try to kind of de-ritualize my writing. Some people will be like, oh, I've got to have like my favorite mug for my coffee. And like, I am a person who will use that as an excuse to do nothing. Back tomorrow. But in all seriousness, trying to fit it in the cracks of a busy life. And I read, I'm sure a lot of the same interviews with chaos. I mean, I love it. It's great. But I've got to figure out how to fit writing into that chaos because the chaos is not going away.
Yeah, so maybe just don't like fight your instinct if you're not a morning person. If I wrote a novel in the morning, every character would kill each other like in the first 10 pages because I'm not a morning person. But I think it shows you can be flexible. And for the folks in the audience, maybe some people want to write, but maybe you have other creative things or second, careers that you're trying to pursue that you can find a way to fit that into your life.
I like this novel about the morning people murders. I would read it.
Okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write it in the morning. So kind of a switch in conversation, but just kind of talking about things that inspire you or that you enjoy besides writing. One of the things I got really excited about when I started following your social media is that you're a Swiftie.
I am a Swiftie.
I am a huge Swiftie. Went to the Eras tour, as I saw you did, and I saw a Ready For It bracelet, so I wondered if you were in your Reputation era.
That's my son is, so my 8-year-old is Reputation. It's his favorite. Yeah. He'll stomp around the house singing "Look What You Made Me Do." My 10-year-old daughter is 1989. She's got the girly pop. I really like Tortured Poets. Yeah. I think that might be my favorite album of hers, and I would not have said that on the first listen.
It doesn't have the bangers, and some people in the audience are like, why are we talking about Taylor Swift? Just go listen to her albums. Yeah. If you've only ever heard her on the radio, she is highly literate. She's an amazing songstress, amazing poet.
She's a poet. She is
a poet, yeah. And so I could see
a torture. I have one that says tortured novelist.
A Swiftie bracelet. I do also I feel like she resonates right now. I mean, obviously she's like the biggest star on the planet, but there's something that's really, that's nice that's happening in culture right now. It's everything from you to Jodi Picoult to Taylor is just, I think in the way that society is going right now, it's nice to have some female voices out there.
Yeah.
We need it. In every level of society, from politics to culture to music.
Fantastic.
So as we have so book. Tell us anything about.
Hard to write a. Maybe my husband would read it, like my writing group, my critique partners. But looking back on that, it was so freeing to write just for myself, for my own amusement. I don't know. I don't care. It doesn't matter. And now, being in a whole lot of stuff in around, not bad things. People going to like this character? Is this going to resonate? What are the all either Um, well, that's kind of unavoidable, really. I don't really want to write a sequel or the half that can talk about Marcellus and Tova and Cameron and all these characters, and then like a clean half that is kind of not involved in that. But obviously,
many worse things to be than the octopus lady, I think. You know, I did hear in some of the news articles I read that there was a amateur.
there.
There. April
29th.
Okay, so mark your calendars for that. And of course, the movie.
Yep.
So we'll have a lot coming this next year or so.
You're going to be so sick of me.
Doubtful. You know, Ann Stanton also mentioned it's
Okay. I use
on a little bit now.
Who's now 10. And I run like 3 miles now, not 26.
So it sounded like maybe after some writing about running, or if you would maybe
So much that's similar.
the online audience will be able to take those questions as well. I want to share a final quote from an interview that you did with Write or Die magazine that I thought was powerful and a good note maybe to kind of end from Shelby in this article.
Oh no, what did I say?
What did she say? Never know. Write weird stuff if that's what you're inclined to write. I certainly thought I had written some weird and probably unsellable stuff when I first got up the nerve to query my novel. I had crafted the hook of my query letter from the octopus's perspective. I was prepared to nod bravely, acknowledge that no one else understood, and slink away. Instead, here we are. You never know. Missing 100% of the shots you don't take and all, but it's true. Write the story, pitch the manuscript, embrace the weird.
That's really good advice.
It's very good advice.
I'm occasionally wise.
And you know, that I think the reason that really struck me is because, especially in a time where we're tempted to see things in really divisive terms and kind of put each other into boxes, remembering that we're all kind of highly individualistic and complex, like Marcellus, that we're all remarkably bright creatures in different ways, the message of kind of embracing the weird in ourselves and in each other is really important. So thank you for reminding us of that, and thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah, thank you all.
So you guys always have amazing questions yourselves at the Writer Series, and I think if we want to take a second and bring up the house lights a little bit, I think we're going to do that to have folks be able to ask questions. We do have microphones here at the front. If you have any mobility issues, we may also have a roaming mic, I think, that we could help bring to you. And Noelle is also coming for our online audiences. You can ask those questions as well. So we'll give just a second to get set up here. And you guys need to not be shy. So if you have questions.
If no one has questions, I will tell octopus jokes for the next 20 minutes.
Octopus jokes.
They're really, really bad.
Come forward. So yeah, don't be shy. You can line up. That would be the easiest, just to make sure we can get to as many questions as possible. And we have our first one right over here, so feel free.
Hi.
Hi.
Just a question. When you started writing, did you have all the characters and the whole story in your head, or did you just kind of develop the story as you were writing it?
I had almost none of the plot in my head. Combining them together and sending them on these little adventures and quests and seeing what would shake out from that. Yeah, I think I wrote something like 350,000 words. This is like 98. So that's a lot of wrong turns, right? That's a lot of material that got discarded. That's a lot of me swearing at my computer when I realize this plot thing that I'm trying is not working, and now we've got to back the truck up 100 miles back down the highway and, and go the right way. And that often means throwing away or setting aside a lot of hard work. So this is not the most efficient way to write a novel, obviously. We call it pantsing sometimes versus plotting. If you're pantsing, you're going by the seat of your pants. And yeah, but it's kind of the only way that I know how to write a book. If you asked me to write an outline for a book, you would get a really terrible plot because my brain just can't find it until it's kind of already happening on the page. So I'm hoping with this next book it'll be not quite that many wrong turns because hopefully you do learn something from experience. But yeah, it's also just kind of more fun to write that way. I think it allows me as the writer to have the experience that readers sometimes get, or you are surprised by something that you read, or you see how something fits together, and coming upon that and discovering it as the writer is really, really rewarding.
Well, I really appreciate you hanging in there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. We'll try to alternate back and forth. So we have one over here on this microphone. If you would like to.
It's really nice to see you in person, and your
Yeah.
book has been an unexpected joy. It's been really fun to read.
Oh, thank you.
My dad's name is Marcel, and I'm wondering how you came up with the name Marcellus.
Yeah, okay, so I studied philosophy in college, and at one point I wanted to name my octopus Marcus Aurelius, after the Stoic philosopher. I thought that was hilarious. This trapped octopus named Marcus Aurelius, it's amazing. And my critique partner was like, I don't get it. It's like, yeah, no, he's a philosopher. He's thinking about his death every day. It's hilarious. He's like, no, it's not. And it was kind of a mouthful. It's like, are people going to think this is a philosophy book? I don't want that. So I just mashed the two words up and made Marcellus. I also just really liked the way that it sounded because it has the us, octopus kind of, they match, I guess. But yeah, that's a great name.
Okay, thanks.
I'll insert a quick question. When in your journey did you realize it was octopuses and not octopi? Because I learned that tonight.
I think pretty early, like when I was doing the research, it's something that would come up in scientific papers. And actually, language people will argue over this because octopi, could and should be technically correct, I think.
Isn't the Greek? Isn't it because it's Greek
or
that it goes
Latin?
into the-
But basically, all of science uses octopuses, so I went with octopuses.
There you go. Right over here. Hi. Step right up in the microphone.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here in person. I love that you talked about the art that you have with the octopus because I am so enamored with the cover of the book. And I have to say, try to pretend that I'm a literary fiction reader, but I often pick books like I pick my wine by how cool the label looks.
Yeah,
so I'm
same.
I cannot stop looking at your book cover, and I'm just curious about the art that went into the book cover.
Yeah. So as a lot of you probably know, when you publish a book in traditional publishing, the author does not get to pick their cover or their title. Really, a lot of that is the publishers say. And I had friends who had published books who were really unhappy with their cover. And so I was kind of steeling myself for a fight that, they're going to give me a bad cover. No, they gave me a great cover. It's beautiful. It's literal, which I love because, here is an octopus on the cover. And when you open to that first page, here's the octopus talking to you. And I really didn't want people to be blindsided by that or confused by it. So I think it's good to have it be as obvious as possible what you're getting yourself into when you open this book. An interesting side note, I think the book has been published in, I know that we are under contract at least in something like 37 countries, languages. Their own cover art. Every single edition, except for one, has had an octopus of some sort on the cover. And the one that did not use the octopus on the cover, I don't think they did as well as they thought they would do. And I think it was because people are like, you don't know what you're getting into. Transparency.
Well, this is beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have you collected those? Or do you have the different versions of the cover?
I do, yeah. And some of them do use this art. I think if they want to use this art, they have to license it from HarperCollins.
Because we were talking backstage, that's another Taylor Swift thing, different album. Question over here.
Yes, I wanted to know if you've ever seen an octopus in its normal environment.
So I do not scuba dive.
You should.
I should. My husband agrees with you. He would like for us to be scuba people. And we've talked.
There's nothing more fun to see in the water than an octopus.
I'm sure, yeah. No, I've only ever met octopuses that were in aquariums. I've never seen one in the wild. I would love to. And we'll do the scuba thing at some point. We're kind of waiting till our kids get.
Do it.
What's that?
Do it. You won't regret it.
I'm sure I won't. It's a little bit scary, though.
No, it's not. One time.
No? Okay.
One time I was fortunate enough to watch an octopus outdo an eel. They fought,
wow.
And the octopus came out on top.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I would love to.
You could have your own Marcellus relationship in the ocean. You could go find one. And
I know. I'm really bad at snorkeling, though.
Oh, well.
The water always goes in the tube.
Snorkeling is not like scuba diving
Okay.
at all.
He's with Scuba, by the way. He is paid to be here tonight for that.
Yes.
That was a really good plug.
Where?
You're going to be out in the lobby selling your scuba school.
I do scuba dive, and I agree with you. It's an amazing experience. Do we have a question right here?
Yes. Hi. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for coming. This is a way cooler event than I thought it was even going to be. I knew it was going to be cool, but so happy to be serving.
Thank you for clarifying that. It was cool to begin with, but it got even cooler.
Yes. Well, partly because I kind of grew up with Beth a little bit in a way. So she babysit me a couple of times, but when we were pretty little, different world for sure. I guess my one question that I had for you was if you can backtrack in your memory enough to remember. I actually fairly recently got into writing. I started getting story ideas just over a decade ago, and I am in touch with the publisher, but I'm so ADD, and I guess I'm wondering if you can backtrack a little in time. A tip or two that you could maybe give to somebody who doesn't have kids yet. What you did that really helped you to just get it down on paper.
Well, don't have kids if you want to get. I'm just kidding. No, I love my kids. I feel like I'm coming off anti-kid. I love my kids. No, I think it really does come down to finding something that works for you. And truly, it is not the same for everyone. And like I said, we were saying earlier, how long I spent trying to make my process fit into someone else's mold or some online article that gives advice about how to be a writer. And those things did not work for me at all. What does work for me is being very sleep deprived and missing every fourth night of sleep by staying up too late writing. And my doctor probably doesn't love that, but you know what? It's what works for me. But yeah, so much of it is about finding that, is about, putting your butt in the chair and making it happen. But doing it in a way that, that you feel like you're not just doing it because someone said to do it. You want to be there. You're excited about your story. I remember getting to a point when I was writing this where the characters really were living rent-free in my head, and they were in my dreams. It starts to feel so real, and when you get to sort of that level of almost obsession, for me it really felt like something changed in the energy. I got this kind of extra little bit of wind in my sails to finish the project. So I guess just cool. Chase that, and I hope you find it.
I hope so too. Hopefully, and sometime in the next decade or two. Thank you. I appreciate it.
A decade is nothing in writing time.
Right.
You did. I think, I just as a writer, I thought it was really interesting as a creative. One of your interviews, you talked about how really getting into characters and imagining what your characters, just as a writing exercise, would do in different environments if you're stuck at the grocery store. Like, what would your character be thinking about? What would they be doing there? That seemed like, I thought, really practical, good advice of how to really get in your characters' heads.
Yeah, I mean, I think characters in this book spend a lot of time doing pretty mundane things. I mean, the opening chapter of this book, after the Marcellus one, is she's mopping. Like, I feel like every creative writing book would tell you that's a terrible way to open a book, with someone mopping. But it worked, so, take the advice that works and ignore what doesn't.
Over here, question over here.
Well, number one, I agree with Randy. You should scuba dive. And
It's like big scubas here tonight.
Actually, I can't believe you haven't had that experience, because your discussion of him having the fight with the eel where he lost his one tentacle was right on. I mean, I would have thought you have been there and an eel come out at you. But what I really of them, and the wolf eels were, to me, one of the best parts. So.
Oh, thank you.
And the courage he had to go into those wolf eels at the end too.
So I have to say that the image of an eel coming out of a cave and attacking me is not really selling me on getting my scuba certification.
That's just like 1 in 5 scuba experiences. Like, you'll be fine.
20%. There's a 20% chance I'm going to get attacked by a wolf eel.
No
way.
They don't attack, but you don't stick your hand into a crevice like he did either. So, I mean, it was like, you have seen that. And I thought, oh, yeah, we all learned, no, you don't stick your hand in a crevice. I mean, I knew what was going to happen when you wrote that.
Yeah.
But I loved the fact that he had specific feelings about each of those animals. Which ones were bright, and those wolf eels, he just wrote them off. So
it's funny, we were talking earlier about like sort of where is the line when you're writing kind of a fantasy suspension of disbelief, of reality. At one point, I considered having the other animals in the aquarium also communicate or talk, and we decided that was way too far over the line. But I feel like I still have in my head some of those voices from when I tried to write them, and I think I probably just gave them to Marcellus.
Well, it was a great part.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. And we don't have anyone over here, so we'll just keep going with this line here.
Hi there.
Hi.
My name's Abby. Thank you so much for being here. This is my first National Writers Series event.
Yay.
It's been super
Welcome.
fun, and I hope to be at lots more. I'm just curious, everyone who reads this book probably connects with a different character or a different plot point, based on their own lived experiences. Was there a part in this book that was maybe your favorite part to write, or is your favorite part to look back on, something that just really resonated with you?
I mean, I loved writing the end. And I so can't wait on the current book I'm writing to get to that point. Because it's when you spend so much of writing a book sort of like ripping little holes in things or messing them up. And then at the end, you get to put it all back together. And it truly does feel like there's a little bit of magic happening. The story sort of takes on a momentum of its own. And it feels like things are happening really fast, and it's really exciting. And things are falling into place. Connections that I didn't see coming are now being made. It really did almost feel like a magical part of the process. And then it also meant that I was done, which was awesome. So, yeah, I like particularly the end. Like the one thing that I knew plot-wise from the very beginning was that, and this is a spoiler, but not a bad one. Like I knew that octopus was going to get out of that tank somehow and go in the water.
Oh, would it maybe have died on a battery? Well, you can use mine.
Okay, I'm back. Now I have no idea what I was saying. Oh, I knew that he was going to get free. So that scene in particular, it felt like it was such a long time coming, finally getting to write it. And I did. I kind of waited. I didn't write it in advance. I waited until I had earned it and gotten there. So that was probably my favorite scene of the book to write.
I love that. Thank you.
So I just wanted to really compliment you because really thought this book was so great, because in a world where we just get little snippets, I think it's harder and harder for us to dig into a novel. And so many people, if I speak to them and they say, oh, I haven't really read a novel lately, I'm like, this is the novel you need to read to get back into reading. Because the prose was really great, but it wasn't like so deep. It wasn't, and I hope that's not a compliment.
No,
but,
it is a compliment.
It's like, it was just fun to read, and it really, anybody who's like, oh, I haven't read a book in a while, I'm like, you need to read this book. It is just so wonderful and so uplifting, and just a lovely, lovely way to get back into that brain of ours that kind of gets everywhere.
It's hard to sit down and write a book.
Thank you.
Read a book sometimes. It really is.
But thank you.
So I appreciate that. I love being someone's re-entry into reading. And that's huge praise.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm so excited to see
Oh,
you.
I love it. I'm excited too. I'm so excited that you're excited.
But I wanted to ask you about your, you said you studied philosophy in college. What about your writing? Did you ever study writing? How did you get, and what was the editing? Or?
So I have never taken college, because as a philosophy major, you do a lot of the books, and then BSing my way through papers the next day. I don't know, but it wasn't like fiction writing. And I think I did take a literature class or two, but it was not my focus of study. When we did editing, it felt like a lot to me, but I was on a Zoom panel with my editor actually a few months ago, and someone asked about the editing process, and I was kind of like, you realize that my editor is right here. Like, I can't, how am I supposed to answer this? But I said something like, oh yeah, it was a lot of work, and she was like, Shelby, that was a really light edit. So I was like, okay, maybe it wasn't your novel. Everyone's all excited. The publishers are like, we love this. We're on Zoom. They're telling me everything that they love about it. And then 2 weeks later, I get the edit letter, and it's just like red pen everywhere. I'm like, well, I thought you loved it. It's like, well, why do we have to change all these things? Yeah, it's. I've come to like that process more, but it was not what I expected. It was hard.
Well, because I've been writing for about, I don't know, maybe 15 years, and I have, as November, where you do my big English in my writing.
I mean, I think, do you have like critique partners?
I did.
Yeah.
I really haven't been writing lately because it just kind of got.
For me, having critique partners was so valuable through the drafting. I had one woman in particular who we would trade pages every week and give each other feedback. And it was such a good just like sanity check on, is this making sense? Am I going in the right direction? Almost like lying at each other a little bit and just being like, oh, this wording is on this line, like you might want to reword this. And that's not like anything, I mean, to do that, like we were just friends from a writing group. So I'd say definitely try to get in touch with some of those folks if you get back into it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you for the question.
I'll think a little bit more about our mortality. And for you. In the middle where you started with, I think, day 1900 or something of Marcellus's life, was that in the very beginning? Had you thought that that was
very book and pain to edit. I don't always, it doesn't always happen in a linear way for me. I think my editor wanted to kill me at one point because we would get it all sorted out. All the days made sense. Days, if it's supposed to be a weekend, it's a weekend here. If 4 days have passed over here, then that, all lines up. And then I would move something and it would throw the whole thing back into disarray. I had like a line of Post-its going across my living room with all the days and all the events to try to make sure that it worked. And so, yeah, the next book is not going to have any day numbers in it. None. It's going to be more vague.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Come over here.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering, when you were a kid growing up, did you used to write short stories? Did you ever try to write was there a time like later in your life when you started getting more into writing? Or did this
I wrote a lot of what would probably be called today Little House on the Prairie fan fiction. I loved those books. I know they're somewhat problematic, but man, I was always writing stories about being in my wagon with my cat going west. And the really funny thing, so I grew up west here in the Pacific. And I had never traveled of writing of those stories. I filled all these little hardback. But when I got into high school and college and young adulthood, maybe I would have had a book come out. Things I student news connected to writing that way, but I think a lot of it was I just didn't see myself as an artsy person or a creative person. I still really struggle with that, actually, to think of myself as an artist. It seems kind of funny to me. But I think a lot of that was doing other things and thinking that that had to be a job where that and wrong artist. Yes.
I love the Little House on the Prairie series. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
They were amazing. Michael Landon, I'm going to leave it at that. Right over here.
What's the process like when you submit your manuscript, everything's been edited and goes into print? How do you, were you on pins and needles? Does your publisher call you up and say, hey, it's made the bestseller list? Or what happens at the end of that?
Well, in hindsight, what I wish I had done was tried to write a second book in that period of time. After we were done with the edits, there was probably about 6 or 8 months where there just was not a whole lot going on that I needed to be doing on a daily basis. And that would have been the perfect time to write another book, but didn't happen. So yeah, there was definitely a little bit of a lag. We did find out that we were going to be a Read with Jenna book club pick during that time. So that was pretty exciting and also a little bit stressful because they're very secretive of these celebrity book clubs. They always want to do the big reveal, so they want to keep it under wraps until the date of the reveal. And they will tell you, okay, you're being selected. So that I wanted Instagram on the front, and I was like, But yeah, it was an exciting. Probably just chilled out a little bit because it's all fine. But
Here maybe we have some online questions.
So this is actually a question from Bill Unger, who's joining us online today.
Wonderful. Hi, Bill.
It's one of our sponsors, so hi, Bill.
Having never written a book before, how did you navigate or know how to navigate the process of getting it out there? After years of writing, did you have a huh or a now what?
Well, I am very lucky that through writing some shorter fiction and other writing activities, I had found my way into kind of an online writing community of writers who were mostly like fairly serious about improving their craft and trying to get published, but not yet published in a traditional sense. And so I was able to kind of follow the herd a little bit. There was a whole group of us that had kind of finished manuscripts in that first half of 2020. And we kind of held each other's hands through the process, figured out how to write the query letters, our website, and give each other kind of support. And then it gives you like a but I was really lucky that I had that, because it would have been, I don't know how I would have figured it out on my own. Definitely followed in the footsteps of people who kind of knew a little bit more than I did about what they were doing.
For the agent who accepted it, there's an anecdote right about the reaction to, it's like either the craziest like book that's ever gonna be.
Yeah. Who reads like 1,000 queries. I mean, it's a lot. First pass over my agent's desk, and her assistant wrote in the margin of my query letter, "This is either brilliant or bananas."
Which I think would actually just be an amazing pull quote to like put on the cover
yeah.
of a book. Okay, maybe we'll do our final question over here.
I never knew that.
Well, for most of the time that I was drafting the book, it was just saved as like, Marcellus version 20.2 _final _final final. And I didn't really, that was my working title, was Marcellus, which would not have been a good title. So I was glad that this title worked out, and I'm really glad that they let me keep it. Thank you. Yeah.
Well, so I know, I know as people are going to either read the book or they're going to be reading the book, but people are probably definitely going to be thinking about octopuses now. And you did so much research. I had seen a recommendation. It had something with animals in the title, but maybe another books or any movies or something that you recommend that people read if they're interested in this topic, because you did so much research on it.
Well, the one book, if you're an octopus lover, if you haven't read it yet, is called The Soul of an Octopus by Cy Montgomery. She is a nature journalist. She writes actually about all different types of animals, but her octopus book is the one that kind of really kicked my butt to get my manuscript finished after reading it and kind of falling in love with the idea over again after having spent years kind of, picking at it, writing the beginning on and off. It's a fantastic book. It's nonfiction, but it reads like a story, has a really great arc to it. And it's just a lot of fun. She goes around to aquariums and meets octopuses and writes about it. So that's always my #1 book recommendation. If you haven't read it yet and you want more octopus in your life, I would go pick up The Soul of an Octopus by Cy Montgomery.
Well, thank you so much, Shelby, for being here with us tonight in Traverse City.
Thank you all.
Thank you for joining us. Up next is best-selling author Paula Hawkins, featuring her new novel, The Blue Hour, Monday, October 28th. Get in-person and virtual tickets at nationalwriterseries.org.